Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Jasadanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Jasadanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Grantaraj Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Gaura Bhakta Ki Jai. So we need the Bhagavad Gita now. I'm not going to show, it's going to fit through my big head. So we'll do the normal Bhagavad Gita class tonight. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we read one of the verses from the Gita Mahatmya first, and then we'll start. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva eko mantrastasya namami yani karmapi ekam tasya devasya sevam. So there's a very interesting verse from the Gita Mahatmya. Maybe you know it. And generally, you could say Krishna consciousness is very inclusive, but this verse sometimes seems a little bit exclusive, but at the same time, it can be very inspiring as well. So I'll just read the translation. It says, in this present day, people are very much eager to have one scripture, one God, one religion, and one occupation. Therefore, ekam shastram devakiputra gitam. Let there be one scripture only, one common scripture for the whole world, the Bhagavad Gita. Eko Deva devakiputra eva. Let there be one God for the whole world, Shri Krishna. Eko mantras tasya namami. And one hymn, one mantra, one prayer, the chanting of his name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes, so, and we are reading from the 11th chapter, the Universal Form, text 21st. So, because we don't have it on the board, we can just do word by word, call and response. Ami, Hi, Tvang, Sura, Sangha, Vishanti, Kechit, Bitaha, Pranyalayo, Grinanti, Swastiti, Uktva, Maharshi, Siddham, Sangaha, Studvanti, Tvam, Stutibihi, Pushkalabihi. Word by word translation. Ami, all those. He, certainly. Tvam, you. Sura Sangaha, groups of demigods. Vishanti, are entering. Kechit, some of them. Bitaha, out of fear. Prajnalayaha, with folded hands. Grinanti, are offering. Prayers. Swasti, all peace. Iti, thus. Uktva, speaking. Maharishihi, the great sages. Siddha Sangaha, perfect beings. Tu Stuvanti, are singing hymns. Tvam, unto you. Stutibihi, with prayers. Pushkalabihi, Vedic hymns. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. All the hosts of demigods are surrendering before you and entering into you. Some of them, very much afraid, are offering prayers with folded hands. Hosts of great sages and perfected beings, crying, all peace, are praying to you by singing the Vedic hymns. Purport. The demigods in all the planetary systems feared the terrific manifestation of the universal form and its glaring effulgence, and so prayed for protection. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyanangyana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Namo Prabhupada Priyadasaya Jagannatha Yatra Nandamurtaye Bhakta Sukaya Krishnodkirtanena Nrisinghena Rakshataya Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyade Shatarine Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namine Shri Varshavana Videvi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayini Prabhave Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyayevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Sarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Sankarshana Karanato Yashai Garbhodashai Chapayobdishai Sheshascha Kala Sanitananda Kyarama Sharanam Mamastu Namo Mahavaranjaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gora Tvise Namaha Namaste Halagraha Namaste Mushlayada Namaste Revatikanta Namaste Bhaktavatsala Namaste Dharanidhara Namaste Balanam Shishta Pralambare Namaste Stvehimam Krishna Purvaja Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopipakanta Radhakanta Namaste Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matergati Matsarvasva Padam Vajo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Dvrindaranya Kalpadru Mada Srimatra Tangara Simhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Deva Uprashtalavi Savamana Smarami Sriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsiva Tadatastitaha Karsham Venu Swanar Gopi Gopinata Shriyestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishavano Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the verse again. Amihi tvam sura sangha vishanti kechid bita prajan layo grinanti swastiti uktva maharishi sida sangaha studvanti tvam stutibhi pushkalabhihi. All the hosts of demigods are surrendering before you and entering into you. Some of them, very much afraid, are offering prayers with folded hands. Hosts of great sages and perfected beings crying, all peace, are praying to you by singing the Vedic hymns. So, who's speaking? Arjuna, yeah. And what is he seeing? Yeah, Virat Rup, Virat Purusha. So the universal form, and maybe you have seen the Gita drama from Bhakti Mark Swami. Somebody has seen it? Nobody? Oh. Next time we do a youth exchange, we should train it and perform it. Huh? Have you seen it? So Bhakti Mark Swami, you know? Bhakti Mark Swami, he's from Toronto, from Canada. And he's a very expert dancer and also known as the walking monk because he walked from Halifax, which is in the very east point of Canada, all the way to Vancouver by foot. So he's known as the walking monk. He's always walking. Whenever he makes a trip, if he would have been at the lake, he would have just left and walked back. Very often just walks back and then you pick him up in the middle of the way somewhere. And he trained in the Polish tour, but also the brahmacharis in Berlin. We were trained by him in a few dramas. He's really expert at drama. And he's one of the most approachable sannyasis I know. And also, he's not at all, concerned about, jumping to the floor and playing a baby so we can learn how to play a baby. So it's a very nice drama. It's with all the actors are dressed in the same color. either pants or dhoti, usually black or gray, so that the different actors don't have an actual personality, but they together explain different aspects of the Bhagavad Gita. So there's a narrator and very nice music, and it's still performed regularly in the Polish tour, and for some time we did it also for Ratha Yatras in Germany. And one of the crucial scenes of the Bhagavad Gita drama, there is the Virat Purusha, Shiva, Brahma are manifested, all the demigods, and then all the hosts of demigods come and they pray, Om Swasti, 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 Swasti. You know? So Swasti is one of the most common words actually in Vedic texts. Swasti. So who knows what swasti means? Peace, but also more auspiciousness. So swasti means peace, auspiciousness, well-being, good circumstances. You know, all of this is included in the word swasti. And in general, in Sanskrit, there are actually many words to describe that. There is mangala, swasti, I forget now, but there's quite a few words describing very different aspects of auspiciousness. And swasti is a very interesting word because this word is used very much in Southeast Asia, actually, in Bali, in Thailand, for example, also Indonesia. They still use this greeting. So when when they pick up the phone in Bali, they say, Om Swastiastu, you know. So may there be auspiciousness, Om Swastiastu. And there is a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a prayer by Prahlad Maharaj, and you might know it. It's in the 5th canto, I think chapter 18, verse 9. And this is a very famous prayer from Prahlad Maharaj, where he says, Om Swastiastu Vishvasya Kala Prasidatam Dhyayantu Bhutani Shivam Mitodya Manascha Bhadram Bhajatada Dakshaye Avishyatam Nomatira Haituki Tvai. So this prayer was actually used by Govinda Prabhu after 9/11. So 9/11, I don't know if you remember. Some of you were probably too small. But 9/11 was when the Twin Towers in New York were, either detonated or planes flew into it, depending, what theory you believe. But in any case, many people died. It was, a big shock for the world, the beginning of the war on terror. And after this incident, they organized a big interreligious prayer at this big church, the official church of the government in Washington, D.C. And they invited representatives from different religions to present a prayer for peace. So Govinda Prabhu represented ISKCON and also the Hindu Sanatan Dharma community, and he chose this prayer. Om Swastiastu Vishvasya Kala Prasidatam. So the first line says that may there be auspiciousness throughout the universe, auspiciousness or peace throughout the universe. How? Kala Prasidatam. So may the Kalaha means somebody who is very envious, or very angry, cruel. So Kala Prasidatam. What does Prasidatam mean? Something like prasadam also, when you eat prasadam, you're like peaceful, pacified. So may the cruel be pacified by, may there be auspiciousness throughout the universe by pacification of the cruel. And how should the cruel be pacified? What's the second line? I'll start from the beginning now again. Om Swastiastu Vishvasya Kala Prasidatam Dhyayantu. Dhyayantu, by meditation. Bhutani Shivam Mitodya. By meditation, or meditation maybe in a different way, may the people think of each other's welfare instead of being selfish. And how will they be thinking of each other's welfare? By Bhajatat Adokshaye. Bhajatat is something like Bhakti Yoga or Bhajan, worship of Adakshaya. And Adakshaya is of course the name of Krishna, which means, who knows? Beyond sense perception. So Adakshaya is, you could say, the transcendent Lord. The transcendent Lord. He's transcendental, he's beyond the modes of nature, he's beyond our petty conflicts and problems within this world. He's an entity that is beyond, that is pure, that is unaffected by matter. So we can become, you could say, emphatic and nice people, thinking about each other's welfare and not just our own welfare, selfish welfare, by practicing bhakti yoga, by bhajatat adakshaye. And then the last line says, ahetuki tvayi, and made you give up this selfishness, self-centeredness. So this is a very nice, very amazing, very beautiful prayer. And Bhakti Sarup Maharaj presented it in such a nice way that afterwards there were hundreds of people, surrounding him, wanting a copy, of that prayer. A very simple but very deep prayer. That ultimately that's the idea of devotion. Devotional service should create a change in your character. It should create such a shift in your heart that you actually become concerned about each other's welfare. In the beginning, devotional service might be a little bit selfish. You're suffering and you just want to, stop your suffering. Or maybe you are afraid. Maybe you are afraid of going to hell. Many people, that's their motivation. And many religions promote it as well. Fear your God, because he will punish you if you don't follow him. Something like that. So fear also can be a motivation in the beginning. Just, you're afraid of being punished or, having to enter into hellish conditions. Or maybe you just want to, be liberated, become free of suffering in general. But all of these motivations are not really the real motivations to perform devotional service. All of these motivations are related to this aspect of Aishvarya, which Krishna is manifesting now here in the universal form. Aishvarya means greatness, and the universal form and the material world can be frightening. This universal form, the Vishvarupa, is devouring, as Kala, Mahakala, the all-destroying time. It's devouring and destroying the worlds. And Arjuna is able to see in the body of Krishna everything getting annihilated. It's like a time lapse, like a very fast time lapse. You could see the entire Kurukshetra war in a time lapse, so everybody will be killed and destroyed. And beyond that, all the worlds, everything. So this form of the Lord can be very daunting and terrifying. And as we know in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna gets very confused because Arjuna was a very close friend of Krishna. They were such close friends that they would share the same bed. They would eat from the same plate. They would, exchange jokes. In friendship, there's not necessarily respect. Like there's the saying, you have a real friend when he enters your home and he has no. Wie sagt man Hemmung? Wie sagt man Hemmung? Weißt du das? Hemmung. Yeah, there's no holding back to. He goes straight to the fridge and just starts eating, because he feels comfortable, If you're not really, close friends, you wouldn't do that, You ask, you wait, Maybe he'll give me something to eat, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll have to starve, But if you have an intimate relationship, this goes beyond fear and respect. So Arjuna had such a relationship. He was very friendly with Krishna. Not only that, they really loved each other. There's this very famous incident where I think it was Narada Muni. Usually it's Narada Muni observing such unique events. where he observed how Krishna and Arjuna were sleeping, in the same bed, and each pore of their body, of each other's body, was singing each other's name, it says. So all the pores of Arjuna were singing Krishna, 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 and all the pores of Krishna's body were singing Arjuna. Because Krishna and Arjuna are, of course, Nara Narayana rishis. They've been incarnating again and again in so many different ages. And Krishna says the only difference is that Krishna remembers all the births, Arjuna sometimes forgets. So yes, Arjuna is very, very close to Krishna. But when he saw this form, he became bewildered, and he even became a little bit afraid himself. He said, I'm sorry, maybe I made a mistake, Maybe I was offensive, while joking with you. And so this universal form, this, you could say, mighty form of God, all-powerful, destructive nature, or in general, anybody who has wealth and power, can be intimidating in a way that we don't feel at ease and relaxed. We might feel tense or confused. You can't be just yourself. You are trying to, live up to the personality that is in front of you. So all of this creates, you could say, an artificial situation, which might be good to discipline and to gain realizations, but it's not necessarily supportive of devotional relationships. So we know that in our tradition, one of the main differences that we have in the Vedic tradition from other religious traditions is that the relationships that we aspire with God are very variegated. There's a lot of different facets. So most religions either have fear of God, a strong fear of God, or they have a neutral appreciation, of pantheism, of nature, of the energetic, you could say holy nature. But beyond that, in some traditions, there's a sensation that God might be the father, the provider, the protector, and to some extent, maybe friendship. But what's unique about Krishna is that he manifests all the different relationships that are, common also in our human experience in full capacity. So he has so many friends, he has different parental relationships, and even conjugal relationships as well, which usually might seem even like a taboo, to talk about God in connection to a conjugal relationship. But especially this conjugal relationship of the Lord leads to the Lord not being just, Father who is in heaven, but the divine couple. So we don't think of God as, sometimes he's depicted like that. Michelangelo depicted God like that, like an old, frustrated, gray man. He's, writing down all your mistakes, of everyone. He's bookkeeping what everybody's doing wrong. So naturally you will become frustrated and, morose. But the idea that we have of the supreme reality is very different. Radha and Krishna actually have no direct intervention in the material world. They're actually completely absorbed in the spiritual reality, in lila and pastimes. And like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, actually with a small fraction of his energy, he manifests and controls the entire material reality. So what this tells us is that this, you could say, unconventional, direct, pure relationship of the Brajavasis, of the devotees in Vrindavan with Krishna, even externally or for somebody who's not informed, might seem like a very, simple village life description. Actually, this is the original occupation of God. That's what God actually is doing. Or like sometimes it's put, Krishna is not really God. Krishna is not God. Krishna is God. Krishna is Krishna. Krishna is, playing with his devotees and having rasa. And only as a side engagement, with a small fraction of his energy, he's God. So that's why, this fear of God and his greatness is important to maybe discipline yourself and to, gain some appreciation of who Krishna is. But ultimately, Krishna is beyond that. Krishna, it says, for example, Aishwarya ultimately means wealth. So even the ornaments that Krishna is wearing in the spiritual world, it says he covers them with flowers. So that's the mood of Vrindavan. Vrindavan, the Aishwarya, that what might be frightening or off-putting is actually covered by madhurya or sweetness. So, yes, so the demigods here are very afraid, so they're praying, peace, 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 swasti, swasti, swasti. And many of the Vedic hymns begin with this swasti word. And it's nice that in the Srimad Bhagavatam we have this one prayer with exactly this word, and it's directed towards Nrsimhadev by Prahlad Maharaj. And of course, in Prahlad Maharaj's case, he's not afraid, and that's very interesting because everybody else was afraid of Nrsimhadev. Nrsimhadev was very angry. Everybody was very confused. Even Lakshmi Devi, she wasn't sure. For a moment, it says she had a doubt. Is this really my Lord Narayana? I haven't seen him in such a mood before. So nobody dared to approach Nrsimhadev. Nobody dared. And then they said, okay, Prahlad, he came for you. You have to go. So Prahlad just, paid obeisances, and immediately the Lord was pacified. So even Prahlad Maharaj doesn't have fear or doesn't have any material desire. Nrsimhadev still asked him for, you should ask me for a wish. Or in other words, Prahlad Maharaj says, I'm not afraid to gain any boon for myself. My concern is with the people of the world. The people of the world, they're in such, you could say, in Germany we say Trott. It's like, in English people say, in Australia they have this expression, sheeple. Sheeple means like, everybody's following, there's a dominant current, and people just join the dominant current, Whatever is in, we just go along, And people do all kinds of crazy things in groups, There's many different experiments. If everybody does it, you also do it, Very immoral things, There's crazy experiments about how in groups, you might have heard about this experiment. There's even a movie about it. How they choose students from a university and then gave them the roles. They should play for a few weeks, inmates and police. And they really get into it. They really start abusing power, everything. Really crazy. It even led to a death, I think, in one of the experiments. So if it's socially approved, we have the tendency to go along. In that way, we are weak. We are very much dependent on our social environment. Or in other words, you could say our social environment makes us very predictable. We are very predictable in how we will react or how we will wish or desire. And of course, especially nowadays with social media, this is being exploited, to the biggest extent ever. We think, oh, it's all for free, great, let's use it. But you're giving away your data. Nowadays, data is more valuable than gold and oil. Everything is driven by data, and the more data you can accumulate, the more wealthy you are, because you can predict what people will do. Information. So we are very predictable. We tend to be, we tend to just ignore what might be really beneficial, and we give in. Maybe to as a very simple, temptation. Maybe even usually New Year. Most people, at least in the West, they make New Year's resolutions. This year, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And by the 5th of January, most of resolutions are gone. So why? Because we're not yogis. A yogi is self-disciplined. So that was Prahlada's Maharaja's concern. He says, I can see how the masses of the people, they're just suffering. They're suffering. They're no idea what they're doing. And they tend to become very selfish and cruel. So I'm concerned for them. Please help them. So that was Prahlad Maharaja's. And that's also the prayer that we just sang. He's saying, Kala prasidatam. May the whole universe be pacified by giving mercy to those who are cruel and envious. May they start practicing bhakti yoga. May they think of each other's welfare. Very simple principles, but fundamental. And the more we can implement those principles in our lives or in our communities, we can have the spirit, like Prabhupada said, Vaikuntha on earth. Vaikuntha is not a place we reach. Vaikuntha means literally, without anxiety, without fear. No fear. That's what Vaikuntha means. So no fear. That doesn't mean that we are negligent and ignore obvious threats. It means that we don't have this fundamental fear of existence. Doesn't mean that you will, I'm not afraid. I'm just gonna, like in India, you have to be really. In India, you have to have an attitude to cross a street. It's not enough to look at the rules. You have to have an attitude. And the attitude is you have to be very tall. You have to stretch your hand like this. You're like, I'm coming. Then you can cross the street. If you're afraid, and if you even for a second hesitate, dangerous. So yes, so fear is something that is it's the nature of this world. Everything is driven by fear. So many things are driven by fear, and it's a constant. We can observe it in animals, especially. With them, it's very obvious. They eat and then they look. They eat and then they look. They're always on guard. Always on guard. And we have a different forms how we are on guard. How we protect ourselves. But fear is very common, and it's a waste of energy, of course. So if we can have this, very simple idea that we think of each other's welfare, then you feel secure, you feel safe. And I'm reading a book about, what is it called? The Culture Code. Maybe somebody knows this book. It's a really good book. And it's this book is trying to analyze how different groups function and how very successful groups work. And what I found out is that the groups that work the best are not necessarily those who have the best business plan or the best management system or most money or the best idea. None of this matters ultimately the most. What matters the most is that there is a sense of security. If the people who are working feel safe, to act and to interact and to make even also independent decisions, then it becomes successful. So, and Prabhupada promoted this. Prabhupada said, we should be independently thoughtful, and our society should be based on love and trust. So Vaishnava behavior, and tomorrow we'll hear more about this from Nimai. So this is actually very simple, but very sublime. If we follow this, we can attain, in our own lives, in our communities, in our families, a very sweet, nice situation where we are connected with Krishna and we can be in Vaikuntha, without fear and fulfilled from within in devotion to Krishna. Okay, maybe there are some questions or comments. Yes. Maybe it's not on.
Manifested his Virat Rupa, Arjuna got confused And
Arjuna got confused.
yeah, and I was wondering, like, in our relationships with devotees, how can we find this balance between, like, being too affectionate, too familiar, and between, like, being too cold and too fanatic?
I always remember when you read the beginnings of the movement, there's a description of this the Toronto temple. They had only this big, I don't know what it was, like a sports hall or some dance hall, you know. This was the only building they had. So they just put curtains. They just put, you know, like lines and curtains, and that's how they divided the entire space into different rooms, you know. Mataji ashram, Prabhu ashram, Grihastha ashram, you know, temple room, you know, just a big hall, you know, with different curtains, and if I remember correctly, the devotees would, because the curtains were, you know, you could hear everything. The devotees would read to each other Krishna book, you know, and very often Yamuna and Himavati. Wie hieß die Frau von Hamsadutta nochmal? Himavati Mataji. She would read Krishna books to the brahmacharis, you know, at night to fall asleep. You know? So, you know, now you might say too familiar, you know, but it's all the devotees that I've met from the 70s. They say Himavati Mataji, she was like a mother, and she nourished the German yatra, because later on Himavati and Hamsadutta came to Germany actually, and she was very crucial for the whole yatra to be successful at that time, and they were very successful. By the end, by 77, by the last times of Srila Prabhupada, Germany was the most successful country in book distribution. Even it's relatively smaller, you know, than America. So I would say that, or another example is Vishnujan Maharaj. Vishnujan Maharaj, he was very famous Kirtaniya. I'm sure you know his story, a very tragic but inspiring story. And he is known to, he was waking up the brahmacharis with a tray of burfis. Yeah? And he was going around with the midranga, playing with one hand, Jeev Jago, you know, and giving the devotees burfis, you know. And like many of our gurus, you know, were inspired by him. You know, and the Jumna Swami, Jayapataka Maharaj, a few others for sure as well, you know, were made into devotees by Vishnujan Maharaj. You know? So I think that, yeah. So ultimately, love and affection is the most important. Of course, there are some rules of, you could say, you know, respect and, you know, some, you know, segregations that might be there, but they have a reason, you know, they have a reason why we have to follow them, and always there's a higher principle. So, yeah, keeping the higher principle in mind, we should remain personal and not be too, I don't know, strict. Actually, the main principle that it says, one should be very strict with oneself, but not strict with others. You know, very liberal with others, very strict with yourself. If everybody does that, awesome. You know? Yeah. But sometimes we tend to be very liberal with ourselves, you know. And as soon as you see somebody's doing something wrong, like, ah! I just learned it in the Bhakta program. You're not supposed to do that, you know. How dare you? So it should be the way around. Okay, anything else? Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhaktarinda ki jai, European Youth Exchange 2022 Simhachalam Dham ki jai.